on philosophy at high school, because I was born and raised in Italy. So we get philosophy very early in our education. And that's a sort of a fatal encounter. If you get sort of philosophy instead of fairy tales or alongside Harry Potter, it is a lifelong love story. And that certainly was for me. I think the texts are just incredible. Then through migration, I ended up in Australia, where philosophy is not so central to the curriculum. So I picked it up at university. And I am of the generation that had philosophy neutral. It was still universalist. Today we would say masculinist philosophy. But I also am the generation that was blessed with great feminist teachers. And the fact that I had Genevieve Lloyd as my BA, MA leading teacher changed my life. Jenny Lloyd, author of The Man of Reason, 1986, so one of the very, very early pieces on the profound androcentric masculinist nature of philosophy, that really simply opened up a whole universe. Then I went to Paris to do my PhD because I wanted to follow Michel Foucault's lectures. Then really, in a sense, that was the defining moment, because in Paris, Simone de Beauvoir was still working. I encountered Lucy Irigaray and Deleuze and all the generation of the greats. And that I think it was at the PhD level in Paris that I became aware that my generation was actually going to be feminist philosophers, something that even Simone de Beauvoir couldn't claim to be. She was very much a universalist philosopher.
I think it was when I studied in Brussels that I really came into contact with the work of Simone de Beauvoir. And I mean, now I'm doing gender studies, I'm doing research master, I know there's a lot of problematic stuff in that, and that it's sometimes exclusionary, and that it doesn't work for everyone. But I do think for that time when she wrote her work, it was so revolutionary, and it was so important for me to get into touch with that work. And then reading her ethics beside it, that was when I really thought, like, okay, this is what I want to do.
I think I'm becoming a feminist philosopher. Right now I'm more a feminist, and I think within feminism that also means already that you're a philosopher, because it's quite intertwined a lot of times. I do reflect a lot about other people, what other people say and what they think, and why they say the things they say. And within gender studies, we talk a lot about like discourse and how everything around you makes you and makes the questions you ask and the answers you give. And I think that also comes back within philosophy a lot.
I wouldn't want to label myself with any specific isms, because I'm pretty sure that I will contradict myself at one point then. But I guess I'm a kind of philosopher that is interested in questions regarding the good life and how we interact with each other. I'm the philosopher who would argue to follow your heart, or who would argue that things don't have to make sense, or that nothing is self-evident, that people are good, and that all is true, but nothing is necessarily the truth. I think that would describe it better than a specific word. Yeah.
Well, my first response is probably to saying by actually not studying philosophy in a philosophy department. I became a feminist philosopher, I think, very much by my interest in life. And so I started reading philosophy extremely early on in my teenage years, and I started really with feminist philosophy. So the first books I read that helped me understanding better the world maybe, and getting along with life, also working through problems with myself, were really feminist works. And especially I think, of course, in growing up in Germany, Hannah Arendt's work was very important for me as an introduction to philosophy, and Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. So this is actually how I started, and then I thought philosophy is not the thing I want to study, but really thought of doing more socio-political angles, and this is why when you ask me how do I become or be now a feminist philosopher, I rarely speak of myself as a feminist philosopher. I speak much more about myself. I'm doing philosophy.
To me, there's no way not to integrate my feminist philosophy into society and into my everyday life. I always try to have an open position, and like it's very easy to get stuck in your own thoughts and be like, I have the truth, and what I think is always good. But I think we should always keep on educating ourselves, and to me, that always is very much tied to philosophy and feminist philosophy. So it's about listening a lot, it's about listening to different perspectives, it's about being aware of your own privilege and seeing how you can help others in that.
For me, thinking is definitely a practice. It's not, I'm believing very much, or being influenced very much by a Deleuzian tradition of thinking, and I'm very much convinced that it is true to say thinking is not something that comes just naturally to us, but it is something that we are made to think by certain encounters, by problems that we have, and that produces thinking. So I think why I'm in this profession also is that I feel we need training actually to think, and that goes also back again to the interest that I have in Hannah Arendt's work from early on, namely that it matters. That we know, that we learn that thinking is not something that is just a reflection about something that's already there, but it always produces something, and it matters how we think and what thinking means. And in my own work, of course, I very much emphasize this because I'm interested also in questions of ethics and politics, and so for me, thinking has an ethical dimension always, and it is something that and I learned from Haraway, it matters what matters we think other matters with, what stories we tell other stories with. That is something that I find very important, that we understand that we'll have to learn that this does not just come naturally to us. So in that sense, I would say, yes, thinking is a practice. And yeah, thinking is practical in that sense. I would definitely say thinking is an action. Yet I would be maybe a little bit more careful with saying thinking is activism. I think thinking is one practice. It needs other practices. And activism without thinking, I think, is not very wished for, but thinking is, of course, not yet activism proper, so one needs also, of course, a translation into a certain doing.
What I found most interesting, and I think that is what I took from gender studies within living in Rotterdam, is intersectionality, and that it's not just if you are a gay, you're not necessarily a white male gay, but you can be also a Muslim and gay, and that's a very important thing to realize if you look at a city as Rotterdam. When you have cultures that clash, it's very important to take into account that if you're a Muslim or you're within the LGBT community, it's not necessarily excluding each other. I think it's most that you try to the things you learn and the ideas you have, because you learn those things. It's you take that with you, and then you have a discussion, or you're chilling with friends, and then somebody makes a strange opinion, or they say something weird, and then you can explain not only why they say what they say, but you can also explain why they should look at it from another direction.
I think I integrated by on a daily basis by extracting knowledge and insights from the things I do, the things I feel. Maybe I have to explain a bit. For me, there is a sort of non-cognitive source that is primal drive to the things we do and the things we feel, and that's not it's prior to rationality, and this source is not truth apt, so it cannot be true or false, but I do believe it's to be very strongly universal. So this source wise, I mean, you can call it love or the will or the heart or intuition. I think we're in this case very much alike, actually, and that conflicts usually occur because of differences in thoughts and ideas, and differences in how we represent the world around us. So for me, to overcome these conflicts between me and myself, or me and others, or me and the rest of the world, it's just by reflecting on a daily basis. That's what I do. On okay, why do I do what I do? Why do I feel what I feel? And why do I think what I think? Because the best way is to sort of, I'm trying to communicate this non-cognitive source as purely as possible. So also to communicate it with others better. And I can extract from that, not truths, but tools to help me and hopefully also others.
This is something that I not necessarily learn to get your diploma and then you continue and you get a job, but it's also something that you do for yourself.
I absolutely think that philosophy is a practical and socially oriented, hands-on approach. It comes mostly from the training I had. I think that this is how Foucault saw it. That's certainly how Deleuze describes philosophy as a practical exercise. Practical in the sense of actually practicing what you preach, which would be welcome, applying the ideas, the concepts to very concrete practices, whether it is the pedagogical one, which is the most obvious one, training, intergenerational responsibility and pastoral care, or whether it is actually in translating socio-political agendas.
At some point I decided that I wanted to continue in feminist philosophy and not just in philosophy, because I feel like also at the university, philosophy as a domain it's very masculine, it's very male-oriented, it's very white, and I felt like some thoughts you wanted to have were not really allowed, or not allowed, but they were a bit made fun of sometimes. So when I remember wanting to write a paper about the role of Plato in about the role of women in Plato's Politeia. And then I had this group of guys that I was studying with, and they all made fun of me, and they started asking, like, why should you wanna even investigate it? And I thought it was just so problematic that, I mean, we were all at university, we were critical thinkers, and then I'm not allowed to study this. So then I thought I need some time where I can ask these questions, and it's okay for me to just ask these questions, and I don't have to defend myself all the time for that. And I found that place in gender studies.
been the founding mother of women's studies in Utrecht, that it was like a video game, a computer game. It was meta-methodological. You had to make the rules of the game as you played the game, which didn't make it, hazard or anecdotal, but on the contrary, very reflexive about how do we go from this to this? How do we extract knowledge from pain? How do we make those knowledge claims? And I'm very attached to the Netherlands because I think it's a country that does things with such profound sense of democracy and profound sense of pragmatism. So when they started the experimental chairs in women's studies at the end of the 1980s, it was a real turning point. The feminist revolution had been enormously influential in the Netherlands as across what was then Western Europe, remember? And the rebels and the revolutionaries were still roaming around. So practicing the very well-established Dutch technique of repressive tolerance, what they did is open the gates of the institutions to some of the radicals, saying, oh, please do come in and tell us what you are all about. And that, of course, the long march to the institutions changed the institutions, but it also changed us.
With Deleuze, I do not believe that we're just thinking like that. We have to be made thinking, and that means we have to expose ourselves to problems. We have to be not afraid. We have to affirm a certain encounter with the social world, and that is something that I think feminist philosophy can teach us, and I hope I can teach this.
Personally, I just really want to keep on learning my whole life. That's such an important part of me, and it's what drives me and makes me very, just happy, and it gives me the feeling that I have a sort of a purpose in life. So therefore, I really want to do a PhD and continue in academia. And I also really would like to teach and to teach others. And maybe one day I can be a mentor for someone else as well. And I think, I've a little bit experience with teaching, and it's always so nice to see others, in that moment when they just see how it works or they differ something that they think. I think that's so valuable.
Feel feminist philosophy combines both a really important, rich understanding of the world, a kind of an emphasis of that we have to learn what it means to be in the world, and it also is about social change and about a difference and about making a difference. That means it combines aspects from different, both practical and the theoretical line, I feel. You can't do feminist philosophy just by reading texts. You embody feminist philosophy, and I think we have great feminist philosophers around who taught us this, many thinkers that we can name here in the tradition of the post-structuralist feminist tradition, be it Judith Butler, Rosa Redoty, Liz Gross, Gayatri Spivak, you name it. I forget now quite a few here, of course, when you start naming people. So I think you have to embody feminist philosophy, and that is something that always creates an activity and an action and an active approach to the world. And this is, I think, a strong tradition in feminist philosophy. And I really believe in what one of my teacher, Elizabeth Gross, wrote, namely, there must be some of us who think of concepts as political weapons.
For me also, I saw that philosophy helped very much in communicating, trying to understand what someone is really saying or really trying to express, and also how can I make myself to the other as clear as possible. How do I make myself understood? And I think that's very much needed today, and also the more importance for the department of hermeneutics, so the philosophy of understanding each other, because philosophers are good at that. They're good at interpreting each other. So I think we should have more faith in the philosopher in that sense, and I also hope to see that more philosophies from all over the world start to interact more, start to learn more from each other, so we can all expand our horizon.
I guess it's gonna start with integration of gender studies within other studies. Already we have that, I guess, a little bit more, that you talk about gender studies. I guess a friend of mine, she's studying anthropology, and she also had to do some gender courses in Nijmegen. So I guess they're already doing that a bit. But I think in the future, especially if you look at objectivity and subjectivity, that's very much from gender studies, that you can not be objective because everything around you creates your opinion. And I think those kind of things are going to be a very important part of other studies as well. And then it's going to be a very important part in a lot of different courses, because it also has to do with politics, and it also has to do with anthropology, and it even has to do with law, like the way certain laws are made. In what way are they made? Are they made to help to create equality? Because law is like you're all treated equal. But are they made from like the view, like a certain start within like you're all equal if you're all the same, and the same is like the norm? Or is it made like you're all equal the way you are? And I think that is going to be, like in the future, there's going to be more knowledge about that. And that comes from feminism and gender studies. So yeah, I think it's going to be like, I hope that what I say is going to be like correct, and it's going to be like that way in the future. The gender studies and feminism is going to be a bigger role in different studies, because then it's going to be like a better future, I guess, yeah.
Having been here for many, many years, I've been in the business for almost 30 years, there's something else that I noticed that charms me deeply. And that is that because I started as a professor very young, at the age of 32, I trained a whole generation of women, and now I happen to be, on 3 occasions, I am training their daughters. So I have had both mothers and daughters in my classroom. And I'm also seeing, consequently, firsthand what it means for a kid to be the daughter of a person who is, I don't want to name names without their permission, but a major Dutch feminist who then produces this kid who comes to my classes because she wants to learn from the same person who was her mother's teacher what philosophy was. What an extraordinary genealogy. And I was thinking, as this episode happened, I thought, what is the pedagogical name that we give to this? It's even beyond intergenerational, it's actually transgenerational in a zigzagging sort of manner, defeating linearity and defeating expectations. Now, that's feminist philosophy, the wonder, the surprise, the astonishment. And is this not what Socrates says philosophy should be all about? So in a sense, we are bringing the discipline back to its passionate core. Think we must, and think we will, mind you.